Hello, everyone. I'm very honored and happy to be here with you today. As has been said, my background is in psychology. I have a PhD in psychology, but I've been working in the video game industry for the past 10 years, so including on Fortnite. Today, I am a consultant working independently, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about the ethics of video games today. So video games generate the most revenue in the entertainment industry while often having terrible press. Some of the games I've worked on are accused of making people violent or turn them into addicts. It's quite disheartening, especially since most of it is fear-mongering with no solid scientific grounds. So what I'd like to do today is just take a few examples. We're not going to have the time to cover too much. And so I'm going to cover addiction, loot boxes, and dark patterns. But keep in mind that I'm not an ethicist. I'm going to approach these topics through the lens of cognitive science. For each of these topics, I'm going to give you the main public concern, what science actually says, and what maybe we could do about it. So let's start with addiction. Of course, there's a lot of worried parents thinking that video games can addict their kids. And in some countries, such as South Korea and China, video gaming has been recognized as a disorder, and treatment programs have been established. But so what does the science say? We have the internet gaming disorder that was added in 2013 in the DSM-5. So you have a list of precise symptoms that you have to have at least 5 of them over the course of a whole year to maybe be diagnosed as having an addiction. And as you know, in this year, the World Health Organization has a new entry in the ICD-11 as a gaming disorder. So that just happened. The thing right now, there's no consensus among the researchers. They say there's a lack of rigorous research, and it's creating a moral panic and stigmatizing over 2 billion gamers that are out there. So that is not to say that addiction is not a problem and it doesn't exist. It does exist. Some people suffer from it, and we need to help them, and we need to take that into account. But also some people are addicted to sports. Does it mean that we need to have a specific disorder to treat people with a sports addiction? On top of it, less than 1% of the general population could maybe qualify for a potential diagnosis of internet gaming disorder. So we need to distinguish between passionate engagement and pathology. Whether the gamer is distressed with their gaming might be the key factor distinguishing the two. As Shubilsky and Orban are saying in this article, problematic gaming is best viewed as a coping mechanism associated with underlying problems such as anxiety or depression. So what can we do? First of all, we should stop throwing that word addiction all the time. We have a tendency to use it a lot. Developers, journalists, and gamers often describe a game as being addictive as if this was a good thing. It's not. Good games are engaging, not addictive. Words matter. Using the term addiction instead of engaging is reinforcing a stigma, while it's downplaying real addictions, because some people are addicted, and we need to take that into account. Also, what we need to take into account is the attention economy. So Tristan Harris is an ethicist in Silicon Valley, and he's tackling this problem, is explaining there's a lot of platforms that are using mechanics to keep you on their platform. For example, when you watch a video on YouTube, you have autoplay, and it's encouraging you to stay on that platform. And because YouTube is doing it, now Netflix has to do it, and then everybody is doing it. So that's what we call the attention economy. We try to keep people's attention to stay on the platform. Another example of that is Snapchat that was under fire because of their snap streaks. It's encouraging kids to keep the streaks and chatting with their friends because as soon as you stop, then you kill the streak, and no one wants to be the one killing the streak. So one of the things we can start thinking about is how we can avoid punishing disengagement. Games like World of Warcraft, they do that. If you stop playing for a little while, you go on a break. When you come back into the game, you have doubled XP for a certain amount of time. That helps you catch up for the time that you took a break. So they are not punishing disengagement, they're even rewarding you for taking a break. So these are the things we should start thinking about. Instead of always encouraging and rewarding engagement in our games, maybe we should make sure at the very least that players don't feel trapped into playing our games. They don't have the fear of missing out. Now I'd like to talk about loot boxes in gambling. This is a big topic right now. And the fear around this is that loot boxes are just like gambling. The Netherlands and Belgium now consider loot boxes as gambling, are thus illegal in this country. The Chinese government considers that the video game industry needs strict control. Last year, there was a 10-month freeze before China finally accepted to release video games on its territory. China formed a regulatory committee, the Online Game Ethics Committee, to oversee the approval of new games, and the review can take quite a while. So what's the science behind it? What is gambling? So the definition of gambling is playing a game for money or anything of value, mostly requiring an ability to cash out. It's pretty close to what's happening with loot boxes, except that in most games, it's not possible to cash out. The problem is that there are secondary markets that do exist. So sometimes you can get something really rare in a loot box and are able to cash out on that secondary market. So in that case, we could really consider that as gambling. But beyond even the ability of cashing out, we have to understand that both gambling and loot boxes and RNG, so it's random number generator, are a form of intermittent rewards with a variable ratio response point schedule. And I'm sorry, like the pictures didn't stay when they reformatted the presentation. So this is, you've heard of that, this is the Skinner box. This is what we call operant conditioning. And there's a lot of fear around conditioning. This is one of the main way we learn from our environment. So in the Skinner box, what happens, you have a little rat, a little pigeon, and they have a stimulus, and they have to do a specific action, pressing a lever. And if they do that, then they're going to get a reward. Keep in mind that this is how we navigate in our environment. This is how we learn. This is how we understand, oh, I'm trying these berries. They taste pretty good. I'm going to do that again. And then I'm trying these berries. These ones didn't taste very good, got sick from them. I'm not going to do this again. This is how we survived our environment through like learning from our experimentation with the environment. That's conditioning. So it's not a bad thing to begin with, but we need to understand how it works. So this is how it works. This is the matrix of a conditioning. If you want to see a reward, if you want to see a behavior increasing, you're going to give a reward for that behavior. The players are doing a mission, then you're going to reward them with a loot. If you want to see a behavior decrease, you want to punish that behavior. For example, if you don't want people having antisocial behavior on your game, you don't want them to harass other players so you can protect other players, you absolutely have to punish these players by, for example, removing access to the game from them. So they are banned from the game for a little while. So this is how it works, and we need to understand that, and we need to understand that it's working that way in our environment, and it's important. But we know that rewards are usually more efficient than punishments, so let's focus a little bit on rewards. We have two types of rewards. You have continuous rewards or intermittent rewards. Continuous rewards is when the behavior, the player action in our case, is always rewarded. You kill a monster, you're always going to get a reward. And it's intermittent when the behavior is sometimes rewarded. You open a chest, sometimes you can get something really cool, and sometimes you don't. We know that intermittent rewards are more engaging, so let's take a look at these ones. You have two types of intermittent rewards. They can be either intermittent based on time, we call that interval, or based on behavior, we call that ratio. Among these two, you can have two other types within these. It's either fixed or variable. It's fixed when you can predict it. It's variable when you can't predict it. So I'm going to give you an example for each in games so that it's clearer. Daily rewards is an example of fixed interval reward. Every day you can log in to get your reward. It's based off of time. It's maybe every morning at 7 a.m. This is when you know you can get your reward, so you can log in to get your reward. It's based off of time, not your behavior, and you can predict when it's going to happen. Variable interval would be an example of that would be in World of Warcraft or MMOs, where we have rare spawns. So this is an enemy that's going to spawn in an area at some point. You don't know when, but you know that at some point it's going to appear there. And if you kill it, then you're going to get a very cool reward. But you can't predict when it's going to happen, and it's still based off of time. Fixed ratio, the good example of that would be achievements. You have to do an activity, an action 10 times before getting a reward. Another example in real life would be you have to work for like 30 days for come back to work every day and work every day to get your paycheck at the end of the month. And a variable ratio is everything that looks like a loot box. Is when you can open something, a pack, a chest, and sometimes you get something cool, and sometimes you don't, but you have to open them. It's based on your actions. So this is how these different types of reward impact our behavior and impact the behavior of the rats and the pigeons. You can see when it's fixed, you see after you get the reward, you stop engaging with the activity for a little while. When it's variable, it's steadier. And if you look at here, when it's variable ratio, it's both high and steady. It's actually the highest and steadiest response pattern that we have. So we know that loot boxes are going to be highly engaging. And it's not necessarily a problem per se. Like any game that uses dice has a variable ratio schedule of reinforcements, because sometimes throw the dice and you get double sixes, and you're all excited about that. Another example of that would be you explore an environment in Zelda, whatever, and sometimes you're going to discover a secret passage or a secret chest, and you open it and you get a reward. That's exciting, so we don't necessarily have to fear that. And in a lot of role-playing games, you have what you call critical hits. Sometimes you're going to shoot at an enemy, and you're going to do a critical hit and destroy that enemy faster, and you're going to get a great reward for that. It's more of a problem when you tie this to monetization. But that's not new. I don't know if when you were younger, you were buying card packs, like NBA, for example, trading cards. That's exactly the same thing. You go to the store, you buy a pack, you don't know what you're going to get. Maybe you're going to get the card that you're looking for, or maybe it's going to be cards that you don't really care about. The difference here with video games is that you don't have all these different barriers before you can actually go get the physical cards. In the physical world, you have to go to the store, have the money, pay the person, get the trading cards. Maybe you have to have your parents to get the money. In the digital world, it's just as simple as clicking. And on top of it, you're not even spending money directly. You have first to buy some hard currencies, coins, V-Bucks, whatever it is, and then with these currency from in-game, then you can buy some loot boxes. So it's that idea that you're spending money is more remote. So all of that is making it harder to exert some control, some self-control over it. And adults, we're not already good at this. So we know that sometimes we lose control. We're going to binge watch something on Netflix, or we're going to drink too much, eat too much, spend too much money. But for kids and teenagers, it's actually even harder because their brain is not mature enough to be able to control themselves. So for them, it's going to be really difficult to resist to this. So loot boxes is really hard to handle by minors. The thing we can do here is to protect children and make children and teenagers and make sure that loot boxes in T and E-rated games are not allowed. The problem with that is we can't easily ID people in our games. It's easy in the casino. If someone wants to come in and gamble, we can ID that person, and if that person is underage, not getting in. Video games, it's complicated. We're never really sure that no one underage is going to access loot boxes tied to monetization. So I can understand why some countries are banning it altogether. We also must not allow for gambling ads on our T and E-rated games. This happens sometimes, and it seems that child gambling has quadrupled in the past 2 years. That's coming from the Gambling Commission in Great Britain. There was a study on kids from 11 to 16 years old. So we need to be careful with that. We cannot always control what ads are going to be pushed on our games, but we have to be able to control some of this. And what we can do is explore more transparent monetization techniques, some that are not using variable rewards tied to monetization. And lastly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about dark patterns. There's a lot of fear around video games that manipulate us. Which is kind of interesting to me because any design is going to manipulate you. The environment is manipulating you into doing certain activities or not. For example, if you enter your car and you start driving, you're going to hear a beep, a super annoying beep, until you fasten your seatbelt. This is design manipulating you into doing the right thing to save your life, fastening your seatbelt. Design is about encouraging certain behaviors and preventing other behaviors from happening. So what's the science behind that? I'm going to do a little game with you to show you what it means. Imagine that you have a bat and a ball, and both of them cost $11 total. The bat costs $10 more than the ball. How much do you think the ball cost? All right, so I heard some of you saying $1, and if you said $1, you fell into a trap. You can do the math later on. It doesn't add up. Yeah, I know. You can do the math later. We are not good at, so this thing is not working at all. I had a game here, but now it's not working at all. Anyway, we are not good at making sense, like making decisions rationally. The brain is going to use shortcuts to be able to solve a lot of problems, and because of that, we're going to fall into traps. We are not good at reasoning very logically all the time. It's costing us a lot of energy to do that. And because of that, we fall into traps, and we are not able to avoid these biases and recognize the stereotypes and all that. So what does it mean? This is the reason why we have user experience as a discipline. User experience is all about identifying these biases and identifying the brain limitations so that we can design an environment, games, objects, systems, services to account for these problems. So for example, we know that when we process information, when we learn, we have to perceive a specific input, and then it's going to impact our memory. And during the process, we have a lot of different factors that's going to make it more or less efficient. But we know that perception is subjective, attention is scarce, and memory is fallible. So knowing this, we're going to make some decisions. We're going to make design decisions to go around these problems so that we can offer a great experience to our audience. But with this, we can also exploit these limitations and biases to make people do things they don't really want to do. But the thing is, it's not the design by itself that can make it a dark pattern or not. It's the intention behind. And it's all a gray area. If you look at a game like World of Warcraft, when you try to delete a character, they normally show you a confirmation screen. Are you sure you want to delete it? But they ask you to type in delete in there. So is this a dark pattern? Is it made for make you purposely make you think twice about it? Because if you delete your character, you're probably going to stop playing World of Warcraft, and they don't want you to do that? Or is it good UX because it's costly to delete a character? You spend hours, days, months, maybe developing that character, and deleting it by mistake would be very frustrating. I would argue that in that case, it's good UX, it's error prevention. But that's the problem. It's a gray area, and there's a lot of dark patterns out there, and some people everywhere are using it, and in the game industry, we're also starting to use it. So we need to identify these dark patterns and think twice about them. For example, guilt tripping. You have games where if you don't buy a character, the character looks sad and is crying. So again, if you're an adult, it's uncomfortable, but you can't self-control. If you're a kid, it's really hard to resist, and it's heartbreaking for children to see that. We have a loss aversion. We know that we are very averse to loss. We do not like to lose something. So there's some monetization techniques that use that. Well, if you don't want to lose your character, you have to pay. Fear of missing out is a big one. And again, this one is very way more difficult for kids to handle. Something like, oh, if you don't get the thing right now, this reward right now, you're never going to have it again. It's just like a moment in time when you can have it. And so if you don't, it's gone forever. Pay to win or pay to remove frictions, another example. And social obligation would be a last example I wanted to use here. When you ask people like, oh, if you don't participate, you're letting your friends down. That's not nice. So we use these techniques, and I'm not blaming anyone. I know that it's hard to make games. I know that it's super costly. I know that a lot of studios are closing. People I laid off. It's a harsh industry, but we also need to understand what is it we're doing so that we can address these concerns. Because at the end of the day, we are responsible for our content. And there's that great quote from the book Nudge from Thaler and Sunstein. They say, there's no such thing as neutral design. Whenever you design something, it's going to impact people in a way. It's going to encourage certain behaviors and deter others. So if we believe that video games can be educational, help people, be a force for good, and positively change the world, we all believe in this here. We also need to acknowledge that they can also negatively affect our society. And we need to face it and be okay to discuss it and think about where we want to put the line and what is going to be our ethics for it. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for your attention. And I hope you have a good Games for Change.